A girl as beautiful as you, wearing a dress like that. You must be looking for a certain kind of attention. On a sunny afternoon along the quiet, tree-lined streets of the affluent neighborhood of Oak Creek, the life of Aria Blackwell took a violent turn. She was harassed, humiliated, and assaulted by Officer Harlan Crow, a policeman whose badge served as a shield for his racism. Her beautiful red silk dress, a symbol of her new beginning in this town, was torn from her body in front of the stunned neighbors. Her dignity was shredded along with it. Yet Crow, drunk on his petty power, never even bothered to wonder whom he was mistreating. He had no idea he had just assaulted a legendary figure, a highly trained CIA operative who had dismantled entire regimes from the shadows. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to break was the daughter of Dominic Blackwell, the most brilliant and relentless federal prosecutor in the country. Crow believed he was putting a woman in her place. In reality, he was signing his own death sentence and that of the entire corrupt system that protected him. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because the ending is unforgettable. The afternoon sun caressed Aria Blackwell's skin, creating a pleasant contrast with the cool, airy silk of her red dress. The fabric clung to her curves with an elegance and strength that were impossible to ignore. The color stood out boldly against the serene, carefully tended landscape of Oak Creek. She was there for a much-needed break from a life marked by shadows and constant tension. She was walking home from the local gourmet market, a small pleasure she had not allowed herself in years. The neighborhood was a sea of old money and tech wealth, where the whisper of leaves was usually the loudest sound. That peace shattered with the rough growl of a patrol car that slowed to a crawl beside her. Officer Harlan Crow leaned out the passenger window. His mirrored sunglasses failed to hide the scrutinizing look in his eyes. He was a thick-necked man, with a face permanently flushed by a mix of sun and cheap beer. "Well, what do we have here?" he asked in a deep voice heavy with undeserved authority. "A little lost, sweetheart?" Aria stopped, tightening her grip on the strap of her leather bag. She had dealt with men like Crow her entire life, in war zones and dark alleys around the world. They all wore the same uniform of arrogant entitlement. "Not at all, officer. I live around the corner." Her voice was polite but cold and firm, offering no invitation. Crow's partner, Officer Sloan, a thinner, sharper-looking man, snickered from the driver's seat. Crow opened the door and stepped onto the pristine sidewalk. His bulk seemed to suck the air from around him. He approached her with a slow, casual stride, deliberately invading her personal space. The smell of stale coffee and something vaguely sour clung to his uniform. "You live here?" His gaze traveled over her face, down her neck, and settled on the curve of her chest beneath the red silk. "Don't see many like you in Oak Creek, and never dress like they're headed to a Hollywood premiere." "I'm not aware of any dress code for walking through my own neighborhood," Aria replied, straightening her back. She refused to step back. She refused to show the intimidation he so desperately wanted to inspire. Crow's smile widened. "A beauty like you. With a dress like that, you're definitely looking for a certain kind of attention." He took another step. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. "And I'm happy to give it to you. My shift ends soon. How about we get to know each other better? I can show you what real authority looks like." Aria's expression did not change, but her eyes, the color of polished obsidian, hardened. "I'll have to decline, officer. I have plans." "Plans?" He let out a short, ugly laugh. "Don't lie to me. I know your type. You show up in a fancy neighborhood like this with nothing, looking for a rich man to take care of you. But around here, you'll learn. We're the ones in charge." He reached out and grabbed her arm hard. His grip was iron. "Take your hand off me," she said, dropping her voice to a low, threatening tone. It was a tone that had made even battle-hardened generals hesitate. Crow's face darkened. Rejection. Defiance. It was a language he would not tolerate from a woman like her. "Okay, you're going to call the police." He and Sloane burst into laughter at their own joke. A few neighbors had stopped their gardening, faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and discomfort. But none intervened. They were silent spectators in a kingdom where Crow was the law. "This is your last warning," Arya said, each word precise and cold. "Let me go." In that instant, it exploded. The thin veneer of civility vanished, replaced by pure, racist rage. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he snarled, tightening his grip until she felt the bones ache. "You need a lesson. You need to learn respect." With his other hand, he grabbed the neckline of her dress. The fine silk, symbol of her stolen moment of peace, offered no resistance. With one violent yank, he tore it. The sound, a sharp scream of ripping fabric, echoed down the silent street. The dress fell away, tearing from shoulder to waist, leaving her exposed in only her lace bra and the shredded remains of the skirt. The expensive groceries she had been carrying spilled across the sidewalk. Artisan cheese, fresh berries, a bottle of wine that shattered, staining the concrete like blood. Intense, piercing humiliation flooded her, but beneath it, another kind of heat began to rise. It was a cold, controlled fury she had perfected over a decade of covert operations. Crow stared at her, breathing hard, a triumphant, predatory gleam in his eyes. "See?" he said, pointing at her exposed body. "That's better. Now you look like what you are." He expected tears. He expected fear. He got neither. Arya slowly lifted her gaze to meet his. The humiliation was gone, replaced by a void so deep it was terrifying. It was the look of a predator that had just been given a reason to hunt. Crow felt a flicker of unease, a primitive warning his arrogance refused to heed. He saw a broken woman. What stood in front of him was a weapon he himself had just armed. He had no idea whom he had tangled with, and his world was about to collapse just as completely as her dress. The ride to the station was a display of cruelty. With the handcuffs so tight the metal bit into her wrists, Arya was shoved into the back of the patrol car. Crow and Sloane said nothing to her, but their malicious laughter filled the front seat as they radioed in the incident, twisting it into the story of an aggressive, half-naked, drug-crazed woman who had attacked an officer. The story was so neat, so rehearsed. It was clearly a familiar script. Arya remained silent. Her mind was a whirlwind of cold, tactical analysis. Every insult, every lie, was another data point. The way Sloane kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror, the slight tremor in Crow's hand as he lit a cigarette. She filed it all away. Her CIA training kicked in, compartmentalizing the rage and humiliation, turning them into fuel. This was no longer a personal attack. It was a mission. Target identified. System compromised. Objective: dismantle. The Oak Creek police station smelled of disinfectant and despair. The linoleum floors were worn. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a deafening hum, and the air was thick with the quiet misery of past arrests. They paraded her through bookings still in her torn dress, while the other officers leered. They saw exactly what Crow wanted them to see: another black woman put in her place. No one questioned the official version. No one looked her in the eye. They were all cogs in the same corrupt machine. "Welcome to your new home, sweetheart," Crow spat with contempt, shoving her into a filthy cell. "Make yourself comfortable. You're going to be here a while." The cell door slammed shut with a deafening clang. Inside, a stained metal toilet and a thin concrete slab for a bunk were the only furnishings. The stench of urine and stale sweat was smothering. Crow watched her from outside the bars with a self-satisfied expression as he began filling out the incident report. "Let's see," he said loudly enough for her to hear. "Resisting arrest. That's clearly assault on a police officer. You threw that grocery bag at me, right, Sloan?" "Absolutely," Sloan chimed in from the booking desk without even looking up. "Saw it with my own eyes. Looked like she was on PCP, maybe indecent exposure for sure." Crow continued scribbling with theatrical flair. "And let's add disorderly conduct. You were making quite a scene." He was building a fortress of lies, brick by brick. "I want my phone call," Arya said in a firm voice, without the pleading they expected. It was a demand, not a request. Crow laughed. "You'll get your call when we say you get it. Right now, you're at our disposal." He savored his power, dragging the moment out. He believed he had her completely under control, a broken toy to play with. He could not see the machinery turning behind her calm, watchful eyes. She was not merely observing. She was conducting a threat assessment, mapping the station, noting the location of the cameras, identifying the weak points in the chain of command. Sloan was a follower, easily intimidated. The desk sergeant was lazy and apathetic. Crow was the leader, but his arrogance was an obvious vulnerability. Time passed slowly. The initial shock had been replaced by relentless clarity. Arya sat on the edge of the concrete slab in a posture that looked like defeat. She kept her head down, hair covering her face, but nothing escaped her. She listened to them talk about previous arrests, using coded language and inside jokes that made it clear the department was rotten to the core. They spoke of how they softened up suspects in the interrogation rooms, of evidence that conveniently disappeared for their friends, and of the usual suspects they targeted in the minority neighborhoods bordering Oak Creek. Crow finally returned to her cell with a slow stride and a folder in his hand. "All right, Princess, here's the deal. You sign a full confession to all charges, and maybe we can convince the judge to go easy on you. A little probation, a hefty fine. You refuse." He let the threat hang in the air, his smile turning predatory. "Well, things get a lot more complicated. Assaulting a cop carries a stiff sentence. You'll be lost in the system for years." Arya slowly raised her head. Her gaze held no fear, only a deep, chilling compassion. "You have no idea what you've done," she said quietly. A silent promise of the coming storm. The statement, so calm and unexpected, momentarily unsettled Crow. He frowned. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face before his bravado returned. "That's a threat," he sneered. "You're in a cage, in case you hadn't noticed. You're no threat to anyone." But he was wrong. She was not in a cage with him. He was in a cage with her. The lock on the cell door was only a temporary inconvenience. The real prison was the one he had built for himself, and Arya Blackwell was about to reduce it to ashes with him inside. She had all the information she needed from this level. Now it was time to see how deep the corruption ran. The sound of polished leather shoes echoing across the filthy floor announced a change in the atmosphere. The everyday cruelty of the booking area faded, replaced by a tense, almost fearful deference. Chief Rourke appeared at the end of the hallway, a man with perfectly styled silver hair and a tailored suit that looked out of place in the station's decaying surroundings. He moved with the unhurried grace of a man completely secure in his power. His pale, cold blue eyes swept the scene without missing a detail. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His mere presence was a statement of absolute control. Crow and Sloan straightened immediately, their smug expressions transforming into forced respect. "Crow, my office," Rourke said in a low voice, soft but firm. He did not even glance at Arya in her cell, yet she felt his presence like a heavy weight. She watched them scurry away like scolded schoolboys. A few minutes later, Rourke returned alone. He walked slowly, deliberately, stopping just in front of her cell. He held the falsified incident report in his hand, tapping it lightly against his thigh. He studied her for a long time, not with Crow's brutal lust, but with the distant curiosity of a biologist examining a new and potentially troublesome specimen. "Arya Blackwell," he said in a calm, reasonable voice. My. Quite a list of charges you've racked up in your first days in my town. Assault, resisting, lewd acts. It's a very ugly picture." He smiled, a thin, humorless curve of the lips. "But pictures can be repainted." Arya remained silent, her gaze fixed on him. She recognized his type instantly. He was not a blunt instrument like Crow. He was a strategist, a man who wielded the system itself as a weapon. He was far more dangerous. "You see, Miss Blackwell," he continued, clasping his hands behind his back and pacing slowly, "Oak Creek values its peace, its quiet. A certain order reigns here. Those who disturb it find that life becomes very, very difficult." He stopped and looked at her again. "You strike me as an intelligent woman. You must understand that some situations are simply impossible to resolve." The threat was clear, wrapped in the silky language of diplomacy. He was offering her a deal, the same one he had probably offered countless others. "What do you want, Chief?" Arya asked in a monotone, firm voice. Rourke's smile widened slightly, a flash of appreciation for her directness. "What I want is for this unfortunate incident to be resolved without further incident. You accept the charges. We'll reduce them to a simple misdemeanor, disorderly conduct. You'll pay a fine, spend the night here, and in the morning you'll leave Oak Creek and never come back. In exchange," he lifted the clipboard, "this report and any memory of it will disappear completely." He was offering her an escape route, but it was also a test. He wanted to see if she was just another victim who could be intimidated into silence. "And if I refuse?" she challenged quietly. "If I demand a lawyer and fight these fabricated charges?" Rourke's mask of kindness slipped for an instant, revealing the cold predator beneath. His eyes turned glacial. "Then the system will do what it must. The report stands. The charges stand. Witnesses will appear, concerned citizens who saw you drunk and aggressive, attacking a decorated officer without provocation. Evidence will be processed. Paperwork will go missing. Bail hearings will be delayed. You could be here for months before you even see a courtroom. And by the time you do, I assure you the case against you will be airtight." He leaned toward the bars, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Not even the best lawyer in the world can fight a ghost, Miss Blackwell. And in my town, I decide what is real and what is not. No one will believe you." It was a masterful display of systemic intimidation. He had just laid out the entire master plan of his corrupt organization. False witnesses, fabricated evidence, and the bureaucratic strangulation of the legal process. He was not just a corrupt cop. He was the architect of an empire of corruption. "You've built a formidable machine, Chief," Arya said. There was a note in her tone that almost sounded like admiration. Rourke took it as surrender. "I prefer to think of it as maintaining order," he corrected gently, recovering his composure. "So you have two choices, a minor inconvenience, and you leave, or a fight you cannot win. I trust you'll make the right decision." He placed the incident report on a small ledge beside the cell door and turned to leave. Confident that his message had been delivered and understood, he believed he had her trapped, her fate in his hands. He did not realize that his detailed threat was not a deterrent. It was a confession. Every word he had spoken had been absorbed, analyzed, and stored. He thought he was locking the door of her cage. In reality, he had just handed her the keys to his own. The mission parameters had been updated. The target was no longer just Officer Crow. It was Chief Rourke and his entire shadow government. And Aria Blackwell was about to declare war. The hours blurred together. The station settled into the quiet rhythm of the evening shift change. The open hostility of Crow's team was replaced by a cold, bureaucratic indifference that somehow felt even more unsettling. Aria knew Rourke's threat was not empty. The longer she stayed, the tighter the system's tentacles would close around her. She needed a way to communicate with the outside world, a crack in the fortress Rourke had built. It appeared in the form of a young officer no older than 30, with tired eyes and a knee tag that read Hail. She had noticed him earlier during the shift change. While the other officers either smirked at her or deliberately ignored her, Hale had looked at her for a fraction of a second, and in his eyes she saw not malice, but a deep, weary shame. He was a man trapped, disgusted by what he saw, but too afraid to act. He was her weak point. That evening it was Hale's turn to bring dinner, a flimsy tray with a stale sandwich and a cup of lukewarm water. He walked the row of cells with feigned indifference until he reached hers. He avoided looking at her as he slid the tray through the slot with mechanical efficiency. "Eat," he said loudly enough for anyone listening to hear. "Orders from the chief." But as he withdrew his hand, his fingers brushed hers, and she felt a small, tightly folded piece of paper slip into her palm. It was a calculated risk, a small act of rebellion in a place where dissent was crushed. Aria's expression remained unchanged. She closed her fingers around the note, and her heart gave a small, steady beat of confirmation. She had been right about him. She waited with every sense on high alert. For a long while she sat on the bunk, pretending to nibble at the sandwich. She listened to the guard's footsteps, the distant ring of a telephone, the rhythm of the station. Only when she was certain no one was watching did she carefully unfold the note beneath the edge of the concrete bunk. The handwriting was tight and hurried. They always do the same thing. They go after outsiders, people who have no one to turn to. They have a blind spot. The camera in the rear evidence hallway loops the same 10 seconds of footage during a certain window at night. There's an old janitor's closet with a hardline phone. It's your only chance. Beneath the message was a name and a number. Theo Lang, investigative journalist. It was more than she had ever hoped for. A plan, a contact, and confirmation that the corruption was as routine as she suspected. Hale had not only given her a lifeline, he had given her a weapon. But it was a dangerous gamble. Getting out of the cell was one thing. Reaching the hallway, making the call, and returning without being discovered would require perfect timing and flawless execution. Any mistake would not only doom her, it would almost certainly end Officer Hale's career, if not his life. Chief Rourke did not seem like a man who tolerated traitors. She memorized the number, then tore the tiny note into pieces and flushed it. Her mind began to work, planning the operation with the same precision she would use on a mission in hostile territory. She analyzed the guard's patrol schedule, the timing of his coffee breaks, the sonic cues of the station at night. The cell lock was a standard model, ridiculously simple. The hairpin holding her messy bun would be more than enough. Her demeanor changed. She slumped further onto the bunk, hugging her knees to her chest, adopting a posture of absolute despair. When Crow and Sloan passed by on their way out, she made sure they saw her like that. "Looks like the fight's gone out of her," Sloan remarked with disdain. "Told you," Crow answered, voice thick with satisfaction. "They all break eventually. The chief will have her signing that confession in the morning." They walked away, secure in their victory. Aria allowed a faint, cold smile to touch her lips in the darkness. Let them think she was broken. Let their arrogance make them careless. In the world she came from, underestimating someone was a fatal mistake. And tonight, when the station was quiet and the camera was looping, she would make them pay. The apathetic guards, the looping camera, the forgotten hardline phone. Rourke believed his system was impenetrable. She saw the cracks, and she was about to tear it apart from the inside. The hours leading up to the critical window were the longest of Aria's life. The station sank into a deep nocturnal silence, broken only by the snoring of a drunk in a nearby cell and the methodical footsteps of the night shift guards. Aria remained motionless on her bunk, breathing slowly and evenly, pretending to sleep. But beneath her apparent calm, her senses were razor-sharp. Every creak of a chair, every distant cough was registered and analyzed. This was the part of the job she knew best, the suffocating pressure of patience before the strike. When the moment came, the two night guards began their routine. One headed to the break room at the far end of the building, his destination announced by the sound of the coffee machine. The other settled behind the main desk, the glow of his phone illuminating his face as he scrolled social media, lost in his own thoughts. This was her window. With fluid, silent movements, she swung her legs off the bunk. The hairpin was already in her hand. She moved to the cell door, her body a shadow in the dimness. The lock was cheap, the pins loose, and her fingers, trained to manipulate everything from micro-explosives to surgical sutures, moved with near-silent precision. In less than 10 seconds, she heard a soft, satisfying click. The lock was open. She eased the heavy door just wide enough to slip through. The hinges creaked faintly. She froze, listening. The desk guard did not move. The rear evidence hallway was exactly as Hale's note had described. A single camera was mounted high in the corner, its red light blinking with deceptive vigilance. Aria moved beneath it without hesitation, staying in the shadows. The janitor's closet was hidden behind a stack of old archive boxes, the door unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and smelled of bleach. The old beige hardline phone sat on a dusty shelf, a relic from another era. Her fingers, steady and sure, dialed the number from the note. Theo Lang, investigative journalist. A risky play, but Hale must have trusted him for a reason. The phone rang twice before a male voice rough with sleep answered. "Lang." "Theo Lang," Aria whispered urgently. "My name is Aria Blackwell. A mutual acquaintance gave me your number. I'm in the Oak Creek police station. I've been arrested on false charges. Chief Rourke is running this town like a thief." There was a pause on the line, then the rustle of sheets. "Okay," Lang said, voice suddenly sharp and alert. "Okay, I'm listening. I've been investigating Rourke for months, but no one will talk. They're all too scared. What do you have?" "Everything," Aria whispered. "Crow, Sloan, Rourke himself. They're fabricating evidence, intimidating witnesses. It's routine. But I have a problem. I'm a ghost. Officially, I can't exist. I need to make one last call to my contact. If he can get me out of here, I can give you everything you need to take them down." "Your contact? Who are you?" Lang asked, suspicion in his voice. "I can't tell you yet. Just know that if I get out of this, we can help each other. But if my next call goes wrong, I'm alone." She gave him a meeting point and a time, a contingency plan if everything went sideways. After he agreed, she hung up and immediately dialed the number burned into her memory. The encrypted direct line to Director Quill, her CIA contact, a man she had trusted with her life on a dozen operations. The line connected with a series of secure clicks. "Quill." His voice was as calm and professional as always. "Sir, this is Agent Blackwell," she whispered. Relief flooded her at the sound of a familiar voice. "I have a problem. I'm in custody. Local police department in Oak Creek. The department is compromised. I need urgent extraction, sir." A sepulchral silence fell on the line. It lasted several long seconds. It was an oppressive silence. "Blackwell!" Quill's tone had changed. It was no longer warm or familiar. It was cold, distant, and carried a note she could not quite identify. "I just got off the phone with Chief Rourke, from that same station. He called my office a short while ago. He inquired about your name through an informal channel." Arya felt a chill. "Sir, what did he say?" "He told me one of my agents was in his jail causing disturbances and assaulting officers," Quill said in a flat, expressionless voice. "He said you were a problem, but that he could handle the matter locally and make it all disappear. He was very accommodating." The betrayal was so sudden, so absolute, it felt like a physical blow. Rourke had not only threatened her, he had reached into her own world, into the very organization she served, and corrupted it as well. "Sir, he's lying. They assaulted me. I have evidence," she pleaded, her voice breaking for the first time. "Listen to me carefully, Blackwell." Quill cut her off, his voice now sharp as broken glass. "You are in an irregular situation. You are on leave. The agency has no operational interest in Oak Creek. Whatever mess you've gotten yourself into, you will resolve it yourself. Under no circumstances are you to reveal your affiliation. Some problems are better left to burn out on their own. Do you understand me? Are you on their side? Are you going to leave me here?" she asked in disbelief. "I'm giving you an order, Agent Blackwell. Stand down. Let it go. That is the official position of the agency." The call cut off. Arya stood in the dusty closet with the receiver still pressed to her ear. The silence that followed was deeper than the one before. She was completely alone. Her organization, the people she had fought for and given everything to, had abandoned her to protect itself from a small-town corruption scandal. The safety net she had always believed she had was gone. She was no longer a CIA agent. She was simply Arya Blackwell, a woman in a torn dress, trapped in a cage, with a legion of enemies both inside and outside. A cold, iron determination settled in her heart. Fine. If she was alone, she would play by her own rules, and her first rule was simple: leave no enemy standing. Returning to her cell was a feat of silent, nerve-wracking precision. She slipped back through the door, locked it from the inside, and returned to the bunk, pretending to sleep seconds before the guard returned from his break. The sense of betrayal from Quill's call had frozen her stomach, but it had also given her a terrifying clarity. No rescue team was coming. There was no cavalry. She was her only weapon, and her sharpest weapon had always been the human mind. The next morning, she put her plan into motion. The defiant, stoic woman of the previous day had vanished. In her place was a broken, weeping victim. When a guard brought a meager breakfast, she sobbed, begging to know what was going to happen to her. She played the role to perfection, shoulders shaking, voice cracking with feigned fear. The guards, simple men who understood brute force but not psychological nuance, exchanged looks of satisfaction. The tough girl had finally cracked. News of her collapse spread through the station like wildfire. Mid-morning, Crow arrived to gloat. He swaggered up to her cell, leaning against the bars with a triumphant smile. "Rough night, huh?" he drawled, dripping with condescension. "Finally realizing the kind of trouble you're in. Ready to sign that confession?" Arya looked at him with eyes red and swollen from crocodile tears. "Please," she whispered in a trembling voice. "I don't understand. Why is this happening? I didn't do anything." Her apparent fragility was like a drug to him. It fed his ego. He puffed out his chest, savoring his power. "It's happening because you don't know your place," he said, dropping into a lecturing tone. "You came into our town acting like it was yours. There are rules here. Chief Rourke is very strict. We don't tolerate disrespect." This was her opening. "Chief Rourke?" she asked in a voice that mixed confusion and admiration. He seems so powerful, Crow sighed. Powerful doesn't even begin to cover it. He's got the whole county in his pocket. Judges, politicians, anyone who matters. One call from him and problems disappear. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a great secret. You remember that reporter last year who was sniffing around? The one asking about the evidence locker. Anonymous tip about driving under the influence. Just like that. Career over. That's how we handle things around here. He was bragging, describing the entire corrupt network piece by piece. All she had to do was listen. Hidden in the waistband of her torn dress was a small, sophisticated recording device camouflaged as a button. It was standard CIA equipment, something they had missed in their superficial search. It was recording every word. "I'm so scared," Arya moaned, burying her face in her hands. "I have no one is coming for me." At least that last part was true. Her feigned helplessness emboldened Crow even further. He laughed. "Of course no one is coming for you. Even your own people abandoned you. The chief told me your superior called last night, said you were a liability and to handle you according to local protocols. That means you're ours now." He had just confirmed Quill's betrayal on recording. It was another nail in the coffin he was unknowingly building for himself. Later that afternoon, Sloane joined him. Emboldened by Arya's apparent collapse, their conversations outside her cell became careless, filled with the casual bravado of men who believed themselves untouchable. They spoke openly of extorting local merchants, of planting drugs on kids from the poorer neighborhoods to meet quotas, and of the bonus system Chief Rourke had for officers who made high-profile arrests, regardless of guilt. "You remember that construction foreman?" Sloane asked, laughing under his breath. "The one who wouldn't pay. Funny how a bag of stolen tools showed up in his truck the next day. He's doing 2 years. The chief called it community improvement," Crow added with pride. "Get rid of the troublemakers. Keep property values high. That's why the people of Oak Creek appreciate us. We keep the place clean." Arya listened. Her face reflected deep sorrow. Inside, she was a cold, calculating machine, storing every name, every date, every confessed crime. The button on her dress was her silent witness, absorbing the poison of their words. They thought they were breaking her. In reality, they were handing her the evidence she needed to destroy them. She now had confessions of evidence tampering, extortion, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, all directly tied to Chief Rourke. She had confirmation of her own agency's complicity. The picture was almost complete. All she needed now was a way to get the recording out. Theo Lang, the journalist, was her only hope. The contingency plan was her only option. She had to escape. The time for playing the victim was almost over. The hunt was about to begin. That night, Arya knew she could not afford to wait for another opportunity. Rourke would want her signed confession by morning, and when she refused, the real nightmare would begin. Her contingency with the journalist Theo Lang was set for midnight at an all-night diner on the edge of town. It was a long shot, but it was the only one she had. Her escape depended on one person, Officer Hale. She had to trust that his conscience would outweigh his fear. When the night shift began, Hale passed her cell on a routine check. This time, Arya did not look broken. She was standing near the bars. When he approached, her eyes were clear and intense. "Tonight, Hale," she whispered, voice barely audible. "That journalist is my only way out. I can't do this without you." He went pale and shook his head slightly. "They'll kill me," he whispered, terror palpable. "They're already killing you," Arya shot back, voice sharp but low. "Every day you stand by and watch this happen. They're killing the man you want to be. Help me, and I'll give you the means to destroy it all. I have them on tape, Hale, all of them confessing." The word recording hung in the air between them. It was tangible hope, A real weapon. He glanced over his shoulder, conflict written across his face. He saw the truth in her eyes, the promise of a justice he had long since given up on. He nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. "The west service door," he whispered. "The maintenance entrance is the only one without direct camera coverage. I'll trigger a false alarm in the evidence locker at the right moment. It'll pull the guards to the other side of the building. You'll have a short window. That's all I can give you." At the appointed time, a shrill alarm blared through the station. Shouts echoed down the hallway as the two night guards ran toward the evidence locker, cursing and fumbling for keys. It was the distraction she needed. Arya had already unlocked the door again with steady, sure hands. She tipped out of the cell and moved through the dark corridors like a specter. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold linoleum. She moved with the lethal grace of a trained operative, hugging the shadows. Her senses sharpened to an almost superhuman level. The west service door was at the rear of the building, a heavy steel door used for deliveries. Just as promised, it was unlocked. She pushed it open and slipped into the damp night air. Freedom tasted like exhaust and wet earth. She was outside, but exposed. Dressed in her torn silk dress and barefoot, she was easy prey. She ran. Her muscles, conditioned by years of brutal training, screamed in protest, but drove her forward. She cut through alleys and dark backyards where children slept, a ghost wandering the town that had tried to swallow her. The diner was a lonely pool of fluorescent light in the darkness. She saw Theo Lang through the window, sitting at a table pretending to read a newspaper, his face tight. She slipped in through the back door, past the kitchen, and sat down across from him. He startled, eyes widening at the sight of her. The torn dress, the bare feet, the wild look. "My God," he whispered. "You actually made it." "There's no time," Arya said in a low, ragged voice. She reached into her waistband and unfastened the button. "It's a digital recorder. It has everything. Crow, Sloan, their confessions. Rourke's name is all over it. And a conversation with my CIA contact, Quill, confirming the cover-up." Lang stared at the small device as if it were a bomb. In a way, it was. This could bring down the entire department, the whole city government, maybe more. "I need your help," Arya said, locking eyes with him. "I have nowhere to go. They'll be looking for me already. I need a safe place, a way to get this evidence out. And I need to make one more call, a call they won't be expecting." Lang's face reflected a mixture of fear and the electric excitement of a journalist who has just been handed the story of a lifetime. He had been chasing rumors and suspicions about Rourke's corruption for years. The proof was sitting on the table in front of him. "My apartment is a mess, but it's safe," he said decisively. "No one would think to look for you there. We'll copy this recording and send it to my editors at a national paper. They can protect it." He slid a disposable phone across the table. "You can call from there. Who are you calling that's so important?" Arya picked up the phone, allowing a cold, grim smile to touch her lips for the first time. The fear, the running, the hiding, it was all over. The game had just changed. "They took my allies. They took my support network. They think I'm alone," she said, her voice heavy with the promise of divine retribution. "They're about to find out I'm not. I'm calling my father." Lang frowned in confusion. "Your father? Who is he?" Arya looked out the window into the dark night, her expression hardening into absolute, terrifying certainty. "His name is Dominic Blackwell," she said. "He's the United States Attorney, and he's about to unleash hell on this town." Theo Lang's apartment was a chaotic sanctuary of stacked newspapers, half-empty coffee mugs, and corkboards covering the walls. Those boards were a tangle of connections, linking names, dates, and incidents, testimony to his long, fruitless investigation into Chief Rourke's regime. Photos of Crow, Sloan, and Rourke were pinned at the center, circled in red. It was the war room of a soldier who until now had fought alone. While Lang worked frantically to download and encrypt the audio from Aria's recorder, she stood by the window watching the city lights. A strange calm settled over her. She was no longer running. She was preparing for a counteroffensive. She picked up the disposable phone and dialed a number known to only a handful of people in the world. It rang once. Dominic. The voice on the other end was deep, resonant, and carried an authority that transcended any title. It was the voice of her father, Dominic Blackwell. "Dad," she said. And for a moment the hardened CIA operative vanished, replaced by the daughter who had just lived through a nightmare. "I'm in danger." The shift in her father's tone was instantaneous. The calm and paternal warmth gave way to the intense focus of the most feared prosecutor in the country. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "For the moment, I'm safe. I'm in Oak Creek," she said, recovering her professional, firm tone. She recounted quickly and coldly the events of the past day. Crow's assault, the torn dress, the false charges at the station, Chief Rourke's threats, and Director Quill's betrayal. She spoke like an agent delivering a field report. Facts, names, timelines. She left out the emotion. He would hear it anyway. On the other end of the line, Dominic Blackwell remained silent. He listened without interrupting, processing every detail, not as a father hearing his daughter's trauma, but as a prosecutor building an airtight case. When she finished, the silence stretched for a moment, and in that silence, Aria felt a storm gathering, a force of nature about to be unleashed. "They tore your dress," he said finally, in a dangerously low voice. It was not a question. It was a statement, a single detail that seemed to crystallize Atocha in all his rage. "Yes," she answered. "Director Quill is an opportunistic politician. He saw a problem and leveraged it. Action will be taken against him," Dominic said in a voice as cold as a morgue slab. "But these men, Chief Rourke and his officers, are a cancer, and the only way to deal with cancer is to cut it out completely." He was no longer speaking as her father. He was speaking as the United States Attorney, the man who had dismantled criminal enterprises, toppled corrupt senators, and faced terrorists in court without blinking. "I have a recording, Dad," Aria added. "They confessed to everything. Evidence tampering, extortion, conspiracy. It's all there." "Good," Dominic said with grim satisfaction. "That will make it cleaner. But I don't need it. Your testimony is enough. Stay where you are. Don't move. Don't contact anyone. I'm mobilizing a hostage rescue team. They'll have a tactical unit at your location shortly to secure you and the journalist. But they're not the main event." "What is the main event?" Aria asked, though she already knew the answer. "At dawn," Dominic Blackwell declared, in the voice of a man who could move mountains with a single call. "A federal task force of more than 100 FBI agents, marshals, and Department of Justice investigators will deploy into Oak Creek. They will have arrest warrants for every officer involved, including Chief Rourke. They will have search warrants to seize every file, every computer, every scrap of paper in that station. We are not opening an investigation, Aria. We are conducting a decapitation operation. By sunrise, that police department will cease to exist. I will personally oversee the prosecutions." Theo Lang, who had stopped working to listen, stared at Aria with his mouth open. He had been chipping away at the rock with a hammer for years. Dominic Blackwell had just called in an airstrike. "And Crow?" Aria asked quietly. "The one who started it." There was a pause. "He's a special case," her father answered, and the cold fury in his voice froze her blood. "I want him to watch his world burn before we take him. I want him to understand the colossal mistake he made. I'll be there with the primary team. I want to look him in the eyes when his life ends." The call ended. Arya looked at Lang, whose face was a mask of awe and terror. "Your father is a man who believes in a very specific and final kind of justice." Arya finished the sentence for him. The waiting was over. The running was over. The full weight of federal law was about to fall on Chief Rourke, Officer Crow, and the entire corrupt structure of Oak Creek. The sun was about to rise for the last time on their world. And for Arya, vengeance was approaching. Not in the shadows with a sniper's bullet, but in broad daylight, clad in the imposing and terrifying armor of the United States Department of Justice. Dawn arrived in Oak Creek not with the soft glow of a new day, but with the menacing thrum of helicopter rotors and the screech of tires on asphalt, exactly as Dominic Blackwell had promised. The storm arrived on schedule. A fleet of unmarked black SUVs poured into the town, coordinating their movements with terrifying military precision. FBI agents in full tactical gear spilled out, deploying across the immaculate lawns and quiet streets with weapons ready. Residents of the wealthy enclave peered through their curtains. Their peaceful morning had been interrupted by a federal invasion. The primary target was the Oak Creek police station. The raid was swift and overwhelming. Agents breached simultaneously, shouting, "FBI, on the ground!" The handful of night shift officers, accustomed to being the ones giving orders, were stunned into submission, faces filled with disbelief as they were thrown to the floor and zip-tied. Agents stormed the building, seizing files, computers, and evidence. Their movements were a whirlwind of practiced efficiency. The empire Chief Rourke had built crumbled in a matter of minutes. Rourke himself was arrested at his sprawling home across town. He was awakened by the crash of the front door being breached by a battering ram. He staggered out of his bedroom in silk pajamas and found a dozen federal agents in the hallway, with laser sights trained on his chest. His face, normally a mask of calm control, collapsed into shock and fear. As they led him out in handcuffs, a stern-faced FBI agent handed him the warrant. At the top of the list of signatories was a name that turned his blood to ice: United States Attorney Dominic Blackwell. Simultaneously, another team was dispatched to CYA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. They entered Director Quill's office not with weapons, but with a formal indictment for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. His political maneuvering had failed. He had bet on the wrong side, and Dominic Blackwell was a man who never forgot a betrayal. But for Dominic, the most important part was personal. He was not in the command vehicle or back at a federal office. He was on the ground, dressed in an elegant dark suit that contrasted sharply with the tactical gear around him. His face was set like granite. He rode in the lead vehicle of a small convoy heading to Officer Crow's apartment complex. Crow had just started his morning shift, whistling an off-key tune, feeling euphoric in his mind. The woman from the day before was a problem solved. Another victory for the natural order of things. He stepped out into the parking lot and froze. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt, blocking his exit. Before he could even process what was happening, 6 heavily armed agents surrounded him, weapons trained on him. "Harlan Crow!" one of them barked. "You are under arrest." Crow's face went from confusion to indignation. "What the hell is this? I'm a police officer. You can't—" His protest was cut short when a man stepped out of the lead vehicle. Dominic Blackwell approached slowly, his gaze burning with a cold, contained intensity. He stopped a few feet from Crow, and his imposing presence seemed to distort the air around him. The agents fell silent, watching. "Officer Crow," Dominic said in a low voice, heavy with the weight of a death sentence. "I am Dominic Blackwell. You may not know my name, but you know my daughter. Her name is Arya." The color drained from Crow's face. the arrogance, the sense of invincibility. Everything evaporated in an instant, replaced by a horror that spread through him, a paralyzing dread. He finally understood. Yesterday, Dominic continued without raising his voice, yet cutting through Crow like a scalpel. You made a comment to my daughter. You told her you would show her what real authority looks like. He took a step forward. Look around you, officer. This is real authority. The men pointing guns at your head represent real authority. The charges that will put you in a federal prison for the rest of your life. That is real authority. Crow began to tremble. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. It was a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Dominic interrupted, dropping his voice to an icy whisper. You put your hands on my daughter. You humiliated her. You tore her dress. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. That is why I am going to prosecute you personally. I am going to make sure they take your badge, your freedom, and your name. When I am finished with you, the only thing you will be remembered for is your monumental stupidity. You will become an example of what not to do for every corrupt cop in this country who thinks he is entitled to anything. You messed with the wrong woman. You enraged the wrong father. An agent stepped forward and roughly handcuffed Crow, who now stood limp with terror. He no longer had the strength to fight. As they pushed him into the back of the SUV, his eyes met Dominic's one last time. In them, he saw no mercy, no compassion, only the cold, implacable face of justice. And he knew, with a certainty that froze his blood, that his life was over. The federal hammer had fallen and crushed him completely. The aftermath of the raids was a political and social earthquake. The story of the Oak Creek Police Department, once a local secret whispered in fear, became a national scandal. News channels played the audio from Aria's recorder on a loop, Crow's racist insults, Sloane's confessions about evidence tampering, and their incriminating conversations about Chief Rourke's authoritarian regime. The town of Oak Creek became the new epicenter of the national debate on police corruption and systemic racism. After the fall of the corrupt leadership, the silence broke. Residents who had lived in fear for years began to come forward. The United States Attorney's Office, under Dominic Blackwell's direct supervision, opened a public tip line. Within days, it was flooded with hundreds of calls, each one a story of injustice. Business owners who had been extorted, families whose homes had been illegally seized, countless people who had been framed, beaten, or terrorized by Rourke's officers. An avalanche of wrongful conviction cases was unleashed, promising long-awaited freedom to dozens of innocent people. Theo Lang's investigative piece, published on the front page of a major national newspaper, was a masterpiece of journalism. Backed by Aria's recording and the new evidence uncovered in the federal raids, it exposed decades of corruption in Oak Creek. He became a star reporter overnight, but he used his new platform to keep the focus on the victims, ensuring their stories were heard. Officer Hale, who had risked everything to help Aria, became a key witness for the prosecution. He was placed in protective custody. His testimony was crucial in painting a detailed portrait of the department's inner workings. He had been a man paralyzed by fear, but his single act of courage helped topple an empire. In the weeks that followed, the judicial process moved with relentless efficiency. Chief Rourke, facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence, watched his network of political allies abandon him. Facing life in prison for racketeering, he quickly accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against every judge, prosecutor, and politician who had been on his payroll. His confession shook the state's political class, triggering a wave of resignations and new indictments. CIA director, Quill was forced into a quiet, humiliating early retirement. His career did not end in a public scandal, but in the silent shame of a secret agreement to avoid a public trial. Crow and Sloane, the two officers who started it all, faced the full weight of the law. With Dominic Blackwell leading the prosecution, their trial was brief and devastating. They were found guilty on all counts, including civil rights violations, conspiracy, and assault. The judge, citing their outrageous abuse of power and complete lack of remorse, sentenced them to the maximum in a federal penitentiary. As Crow was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, he looked like a shadow of the arrogant man who had terrorized Aria on that quiet street. He had been broken not by violence, but by the relentless machinery of the law. Aria watched the proceedings not from the front row, but from a distance. She had given her testimony, a calm, objective account of what had happened. She had done her duty. Her war was over. She had never sought vengeance the way Crow would have understood it. She wanted to dismantle the machine that created men like him. And she had succeeded. One cool afternoon, sometime after the sentencing, she stood with her father on the balcony of his apartment in Washington, D.C., looking out over the city's monuments. The lights glowed below, symbols of a nation's ideals. Ideals that were so often corrupted by the imperfect men who represented them. "They're all gone," she said quietly. "The entire network erased." "Justice isn't about erasing, Aria," Dominic corrected gently, dropping the severe tone of the prosecutor and speaking simply as a father. "It's about restoring, about giving a voice back to those who were silenced. What you did in that town was give those people their voice back. That is a far greater victory than simply locking up a few criminals." Aria thought of the people of Oak Creek, the families reuniting, the wrongly accused being freed, the community now holding meetings to help the Department of Justice build a new, accountable police force from the ground up. She had been the catalyst, the spark. But they, the people, were the fire now cleansing the town. "That red dress is still in my closet," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Torn. Ruined." "No," her father said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's not ruined. It's evidence. It's a reminder. A reminder that sometimes, for justice to be done, something has to break first to reveal the truth underneath." Aria looked at her reflection in the glass. She no longer saw a victim or a soldier. She saw a woman, whole and unbroken. The system had tried to destroy her dignity, and it had failed. In the end, it was the system itself that collapsed, and in its place, something new, something better, was beginning to bloom. What you have just heard is a story about the immense power of courage and the unyielding demand for justice. It reminds us that one person's refusal to be a victim can spark a revolution. Which part of Aria's story impacted you the most? Have you ever witnessed a situation where you wished someone had stepped in to make things right? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter.